is what it is. Somebody gonna have to go to work. So it's unrealistic.
Well, hello, professionals. Let me welcome you to our boardroom. In this room, we like to talk about problems in the business world from a practical standpoint. My name is Dr. Burks. I am one part of Be Professional Consultancy, and I am an unconventional HR practitioner and enthusiast.
And I'm Dr. Ellison, also one part of Be Professional Consultancy. I'm a veteran and expert in leadership and professional development.
Combined, we have over 3 decades of experience, and we enjoy helping others improve performance from the janitor to the C suite.
Dr. Burks and I have had some traumatic experiences because of workplace unprofessionalism, executive disengagement, and lack of accountability. We hope to leverage our experiences so that you can get better results in your workplace. The topic we'll discuss today is flex schedules or inflexible work schedules. That's one we can't wait to have with you. Today, we'll talk about what flex schedules are and why you might not be able to flex your schedule as much as you'd like to in the workplace, how they impact you, whose primary responsibility is it, and we'll leave you with some things that you can do, hopefully. We wanted to address this topic in flexible work schedules because this was presented to us as a problem in the workplace that employees were was either fearful to challenge it or they were unsure how to navigate it. Inflexible work schedules have Gen Z leaving jobs at record numbers and some of us older workers as well. Since the pandemic, a lot of us are wanting work schedules that are a lot more flexible. As a matter of fact, there's no shortage of jobs. It's the demand for remote work that is at an all time high. We've posted on our other platforms about popular companies like Amazon and others that are mandating some companies, their leaders to return back full time. Recently, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said the same when he was asked about government employees working remote after Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy took their plans to reduce government waste by $2 trillion to Congress. And this is some real world experience for me as a military veteran and one that has over 2 decades of hospital and business experience. Those are jobs that are 24/7, 365 days a year. I have a lot of experience in kind of navigating how to flex schedules. And I will never forget Dr. Burks when our pandemic policy for remote work expired. There was a line outside of my office. My email was overflowing. I got stopped everywhere I went, all in attempts to try to figure out how we could keep this policy in place. Everybody wanted to try to understand why this policy expired, how we could keep remote work. And many of them had understandable reasons for wanting to remain working remote. And as a leader, and I'm sure you probably have this experience too, Dr. Burst, we're often faced with tough decisions like this. And I can't wait to dig into this topic. The world, obviously, as mentioned, has become more familiar with flex time and remote work schedules during the pandemic. But being on flex schedules is something that goes back to the beginning of time. And when I say the beginning of time, I'm talking about biblical times. In the book of Psalms, chapter 104 and verse 19, it says that you made the moon to work the seasons, and the sun knows when to set. Nehemiah 11:23 says, their daily responsibilities was carried out according to the terms of a royal command. So there was a family of Levitical singers at God's temple after the people they had occupations in Jerusalem. And so just depending on who was in charge, what type of work you had, that determined what your schedule was going to be like. So, flexing the schedule, different types of work hours and shifts, this it goes back since the beginning of time. So this is nothing new. So it's understandable for why people want to be able to work from home or they want to be able to work remotely. But we do want to clarify, and it is traditional for Dr. Burks and I that we give a proper definition of what flex time is. Did you know that the origin of flex is from the early 16th century and likely means what you think it means? The formal definition, however, is according to the Oxford Dictionary, it means to bend or to curve or an angle. But it can also mean tighten or taut, to contract or stiffen. For example, when you get a Charlie horse, like I did when I was in training one time, my muscles just locked up on me while I was asleep in my tent one time, and I had to like flex my calf to it tautened my calf to get it out. So flex can be a bend, or it can mean sometimes you got to tighten up on some stuff. Flex time is a fairly recent term. The origin of that is from the 1970s, and it's a blend of flexible and time. It's a system of working a set number of hours with the starting and finishing times chosen with agreed limits by the employee. Dr. Burks?
I don't know how to follow behind that, quite honest. But honestly, I think post COVID, the ideology of flexing time, working remotely, specifically the ability to tailor your schedule per your personal need has become more prevalent and common for me. In my role, I have the ability to work in multiple settings. I have the opportunity to have a hybrid schedule. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is the business still came first. So, amidst me wanting to accommodate household issues or demands, the business still had to come first. So, in flexing time, the most important thing was how are you allowing your schedule to accommodate the business need? Because ultimately, the business is always going to come first.
And I think you are making a very valid point there. And I think we've discussed this in the past, making sure that not only the executives, but from the top to the bottom up, that everybody understands the mission and the vision.
Yep.
And not only um, does the mission come first, and I know that that was something that we said a lot when I was in the military, mission first, also people first, and
Mhm.
understanding how you can take care of people and the mission at the same time. You don't have to compromise the mission to take care of people, and you don't have to compromise taking care of people
Mhm.
and then not be able to do the mission. There's a way to be able to do both, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes
Mhm.
you have to put that mission first. And again, like we said, it depends on the type of work you do. For example, Amazon, effective come next month, they are calling some of their managers, actually, all of their leadership and management team, they're calling them back to the office full time. Why?
Mhm.
In order for them to become more great, they want their leaders there for creativity so that they can develop better products and services for me and you. Dr. Burks?
When I talk about flex time and the necessity of creating a balance, I think it's important to again consider the nature of your work. So, using Amazon as an example, you kind of sign you have to conform to the responsibilities of your job. So someone in a janitorial position, for example, won't have the same responsibilities as someone in the C-suite, and you kind of have to accept the fact that it comes with the position. um, Three things that I like to bring up, if I may, Dr. Ellison. I like to talk about a work life balance. I like to talk about the importance of speaking up. And I like to talk about the ideal of using your PTO. So when we're incorporating these different responsibilities, everyone should still be able to balance their personal and professional life. And what does that look like? For me, it means your ability to clock out. So when you think of a non exempt position, naturally you go to the time clock, you clock out, and then there's someone to pick up whatever you didn't complete when you leave. When you are an exempt employee, whatever work you don't complete in that day is still waiting for you the next day. If I can give an example, Dr. Ellison, one of the main struggles that I had, though I had a hybrid position or though I had a fairly flexible schedule, my job still lived rent free in my head. My job still, even on the weekend, I still felt like I was at work. I still had this overwhelming sense of urgency to check my emails or make sure I wasn't missing anything. So then by the end of Sunday night and then Monday came, I never felt like I had a Saturday or a Sunday. I felt like I walked out of my office and turned right back around and walked back in. And I love a site, it's called Mental Health America. And it talks about how a poor work life balance can impact your health. So, not necessarily just your ability to sleep, but also GI issues. It can impact your mood. It can lead to depression and a plethora of other impacts. So, you, especially when we're talking about the need to conform to the needs of the business or the requirement to conform, when you create that balance, you also have to keep your health and your mental health in mind. And a lot of times, I think that that gets lost when you are trying to present yourself as being effective at home and then also at work. So, Dr. Ellison, I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because a lot of my perspective is coming from the executive and the leadership perspective. And one of the reasons why leaders and executives are hesitant at times to allow a lot of remote work. And we talked about this in our last video, and we hope you go check it out. It's about burnout. Believe it or not, there is the potential for burnout even when working teleworked or remote work or flex work because it is difficult unless you are very structured and disciplined to have boundaries at home. And so when we talk about work life balance, as Dr. Burks mentioned, how do you do that when you're working remotely? And in preparation for this discussion, I came across a study that actually showed how women don't have better access to flex time. The study showed that because of kids, cooking, home responsibilities, not having the same level of respect, they
Mhm,
actually preferred to be in the office to be
mhm,
more productive because it seemed that their time working remotely at home, the boundaries weren't respected as much. And that can be the case for males also. But beware of burnout. And another thing that executives and leaders find is that when workers return back to the office after working remote, a lot of times, and this was my experience as well, they returned back once that policy expired, they had more issues,
mhm,
marital issues, kid issues, financial issues. They had been at home and exposed to so many other things. People had got used to them being there that it was hard for them to break away when the policy expired to come back to the office full time because they had taken on all of this other stuff. Because guess what happens when you don't have to commute to the office? That commute time you can now devote to doing other things, working out, or you may start taking on other responsibilities. And then when you have to come back to the office, that's a whole nother dynamic that you have to contend with. Oh, now I got to go back to spending $1,600 in childcare. And let's face,
yeah,
childcare is expensive.
yes,
And
it is.
so, just to turn it back over to you, Dr. Burks, I think a lot of times people don't think It seems who doesn't want to work at home in their PJs
Mhm.
or not, have to waste gas and spend an hour commuting, each way to work and stuff. But, being burned out and not having clear boundaries is definitely a potential pitfall and one that executives do think about when
Mhm.
their staff members aren't in the office.
Well, I can be honest. I love being able to be business professional or business casual from here up and have my pajamas on at the bottom because no one was expecting me to stand up, so you would never know. So, to your point, it was very convenient to be able to, instead of getting up at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning and prepping to go to work, it was nice to be able to sleep in or make some coffee and then come downstairs, sit in front, of course, brush my teeth and wash my face, but come downstairs and have a meeting. And then when I'm done, I can log back off. I can go get back in my bed. I can go sit on the couch or I can watch TV. Some of the most common struggles that I observed as well was that people had been accustomed to saving money on gas and they were able to spend more time with their families. And then that became the norm. And then that was taken away. So I mentioned work life balance, and I also mentioned speaking up. So speaking up is important because when you go back into the office, for example, or when you're working at home and that dynamic is different, it is important for you to communicate when you feel overwhelmed because it does impact your performance. When you aren't feeling like you're getting ahead of your work, then it will overall impact your success in that. So it is important to keep in mind, yes, you are going through changes or your dynamic, your work area looks different. So keeping that line of communication is open. If you're struggling to meet deadlines or if you are feeling like you're not managing your time correctly, if you are in a remote position, your manager can't see what you're doing. Versus if you are in the office, your manager can see what you are doing. And because of that, there is that bias. Whereas in COVID, for example, companies were forced to show that employees could be productive at home. Whereas other companies were just like, okay, we've gotten this thing under control. I want you back in the office because their perception of productivity was contingent on where they sat during their shift. So Dr. Ellison mentioned after, the ability to work remote was taken away, she had a line of people outside of her door because it worked for them. Whereas the business or the military felt like that was no longer needed. You can come back to work and do your job effectively.
Yeah, and I think that there can be some bias, when it pertains to leadership and those that choose to work remotely. And the jury is still out as to whether or not it's people are more productive or not. And I think the answer to that is it depends. It
Mhm,
depends on what it is that you do for a living. If it's
mhm,
something that can be measured strictly, then of course, we can determine how productive you are based on the numbers or not. But some of us have jobs that are qualitative in nature, and there are just frankly some things that you can't measure. And so I do want to express some things that we think about as leaders that a lot of people that are looking for remote work may not consider. One of those things is benefits to the local economy and tax deductions.
that's good.
Let's keep it a buck. When you have to physically go to the office, it enhances the local economy because guess what happens at lunchtime? You're going to your local coffee shops and the local restaurants, or you may go shopping on your lunch break and
Mhm,
buying school clothes or getting the latest, handbags and stuff like that. You may do that on your lunch break, whereas when people were working remotely, people weren't really shopping or going out on the local economy that way. So that is also one benefit. Employers do get certain bedazzlements, tax
mhm,
benefits from actually having employees physically in the buildings because they have to pay for those buildings, which leads me to my next point.
Mhm.
When employees are not physically there, there's expenses that are incurred. So whether you work there or not, the rent still has to get paid. And there
Mhm.
are organizational responsibilities. So everybody can't be remote at the same time. There has to
Mhm.
be some sort of schedule. So now, as an executive or a leader or a operations director, I have to think about security. I can't just have random people picking when they want to come and go in the building. The lights have to stay on, the air conditioner or the heating unit has to be on. And there's the additional hiring of management because now I have to figure out who's working remote and when, and how am I going to manage those people. Now, another thing that we usually don't take into consideration is that working remotely, believe it or not, is bad for junior and new employees.
Mm.
Not good. So if you are a young employee or a new employee, it's good to get the lay of the land, to figure out how things work, to get an apprenticeship, to be able to bounce ideas off of people, to kind of find out and become an expert in how the organization works and to build teams. Also, for executives, you're always being watched. You're
Mhm.
always being watched. And when we are looking at people for promotion, we promote based on potential. So, how do we do that? Based on how do you interact with others? What is your character like? These are all things that we really can't measure through an email or some sort of virtual messaging system. Those are things that require face to face social encounters, right? And also, when you're working from home, you have to motivate yourself. And some of us are better at doing that than others. And from a leadership perspective, one thing that I noticed in particular is that there is a decrease in mentorship or learning when people are working from home. People just feel like they can just click, click, click and be productive, but there's a lot more to your work than the actual work itself. There are a lot of soft skills and other type of skills that you learn that make you good at your job, such as verbal communication,
Mhm.
preparing things, getting others feedback, those things that allow us to look at you for a promotion. I'm getting older, I'm not always going to be here, let me look at this person for potential. And so, just think about what it is that you want to do and whether working remote is good. I want to
Mhm.
work at home. I want to be comfortable, but I want to get promoted too. So sometimes you got to pick what color juice you want to drink. Do you want to work at home and be comfortable, or are you trying to elevate your paycheck? And what does it take to do that, Dr. Burks?
I think the most important thing to consider is that some positions require face-to-face interactions. It's inevitable. You can't I'll use as an example again. Yes, I can do my job remotely. Yes, I can be flexible, but I am still a human resource. Some people don't want to only talk to you via Teams or Skype or WebEx. Some people need to see you face to face. Some people don't feel comfortable having certain conversations virtually. And so, even though I have the ability to work some days from home, it is still essential for me to be in person to be able to embrace those interactions with my staff. I am extroverted by nature, so it is nothing for me to build strong professional relationships on any platform, but I also have to take into consideration that there are people who have one preference over another. And that just comes with the territory. It comes with the field that I work in. And then it also is contingent on the industry that I'm working in. What are the values and the expectations for the organization? And to be honest with you, when you work someplace, unless you are working for yourself, you have to adhere to whatever their standards are. So we can't get into it today, but Dr. Ellison made a really, really good point on setting the tone for capabilities, high potential, low potential. If you have never seen a 9 box before, I highly encourage you to look into it. If you saw our post on Monday, when we talked about what is wrong with your schedule, the question that I posed was, who is responsible for managing your schedule? Is it your manager? Is it you? Or is it a joint effort? Now, I can have my views on it, and then Dr. Ellison may have a different perspective, but one thing that I would like to bring into the chat, if I could, is the ideal of PTO or vacation time. So I said work life balance, I said speak up. Now we're going to roll into PTO. So ultimately, you are given PTO with the expectation for you to use it to have time away from work. Because constantly working, leaving work early, or utilizing your off days as your opportunity to step away from work is not going to be sustainable. Eventually, you're going to have to take time off outside of the normal time frames that you are being allotted. So I have been in a professional setting where I've had vacation time. So I knew for a fact I had 14 days to utilize for vacation time on top of paid holidays. And then in a more recent encounter, we were given PTO, which was a little more strenuous, or I think it required a lot more discipline, I guess I should say, because now you have to, accrue this time before you can use it. So you take so long to accrue the time that when you want to take advantage of using it, you feel bad. You don't want to touch it. You kind of treat it like a savings account. You tuck it away if you need to use it, but then you feel bad when you have to use it. And that is crazy, but it's in reality. It's a reality. So I encourage people to utilize that time now within reason. You have deadlines. If you don't have coverage, will your work still be able to be done, or can you afford to put it on hold before you do, decide to take that time? Going back to Mental Health America, which I love this study, but it actually said that 75% of people felt afraid or nervous to take time off, even though it was for their mental health. So then my question is, how did we get here where you feel bad to take time for yourself? So Dr. Ellison, especially coming from working in the military where you had to meet the demands of your job, what are your thoughts on needing to take time away for you?
Let me tell you, I have not been always the best steward of my time. Being a good steward of my time is something that I learned the hard way. Like I mentioned before, landing myself in a hospital is how I found out I wasn't a very good steward of my time. There were times throughout my career where I had accumulated 90, up to 90 days, the maximum the military would allow you to carry a leave. I had it because I would just never take leave. I would just, whenever we had holiday weekends or 4-day weekends and stuff like that, that's when I would take my time off. I never really took leave. I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So why should I use the leave days? And I would never use those leave days. But nobody is going to take care of you like you, because best believe whatever organization that you work for, they're going to take care of them.
Mhm,
And they want you to take care of you so that you can be a good asset for them.
mhm,
So taking care of you is not just beneficial for you, it's beneficial for the organization as well. And it
mhm,
took me quite a while to learn that lesson for myself, that I have to be my best self, not for me, but for others too. Because if I don't take care of myself, I'm not good for anybody. Not my kids, not my spouse, not my friends, and definitely not my coworkers. What good am I to others if I'm laid up sick, or if I'm stressed out, or burnt out, or stressed out and haven't taken any time? So you can have a what they call a staycation, but take your time off because you've earned it. You've earned it. A lot of times we feel like we don't get recognition at work. We haven't gotten a promotion. We haven't gotten a reward. Feel like they haven't given us anything, but we have earned and accumulated that time off. Reward yourself. Stop
Mhm.
expecting other people to reward you. Go and reward yourself with some time off that you've earned. Dr. Burks.
I agree. And I think if I can leave you with anything, keep in mind that in balancing your schedule and positioning yourself for elevation, you have to remember that when you neglect yourself, being there for the business, there are some people that I've encountered where they neglect themselves because they want the job to understand how dedicated they are. They want the job to see the sacrifice that they're making by not taking care of themselves because they want to be here and prove their worth. And that's counterproductive and it's not sustainable. So, moving forward, regardless of the level or the type of industry you are in, you have a requirement for yourself. You are 100% responsible of taking care of you. Every organization is not going to prioritize you taking care of yourself. Some organizations will make you clock out and take time. Some organizations that I've worked in, when our non-exempt staff have PTO, for example, they meet a cap. So it's like you can only accrue PTO to a certain point and then you lose it. So who wants to work and strive and hustle at work and then get nothing from it? So it forces you to take that time. So any organization, for the most part, of course, they're going to appreciate your dedication, but you also have to be dedicated to yourself. So determine what is most important. Are you willing to sacrifice being in person to have some flexibility at home? Are you willing to sacrifice your salary, whereas you may save a little more money because you don't have childcare expenses or you're saving gas? But are you willing to sacrifice what pros are you willing to compromise on for the cons, but you are responsible for you and you have an accountability to make sure you are okay to be able to perform your job. As a person who works in human resources, I always say taking care of me helps me take care of the people that I support so they can take care of the business. So keeping that in the forefront of my mind, which I will be completely honest with you, is something that I struggle with because I have, you know, a lot of people that need support from me that they can't get from anyone, but I also get to the point where I realize it's time for me to take a step back. And Dr. Ellison and I joke all of the time, but it's such a real statement. If something happens to you, your job will be posted immediately. So when your family has to go to your funeral, one of the things that will be in your eulogy, or one thing that will not be in your eulogy, is how hard of a worker you are, or how many PTO days you didn't use, or how nice you were to your coworker. That's not the legacy that you want to leave. So you have an obligation professionally to take care of yourself. So, Dr. Ellison, I don't want to wrap up everything and not give you an opportunity to speak, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think you pretty much hit that last point there, but I'll say my final piece here. And this is to the leaders. Take care of your people. If you
Mhm.
can accommodate flexible schedules and remote schedules without compromising the mission in any way and be successful in doing it, be a strategist and figure out how to make it work so that your organization is successful. Take care of your people because when you take care of your people, you take care of the organization. A well kept, healthy organizational climate positively impacts your bottom line. At the end of the day, isn't that what most corporations are concerned with, right? The bottom line. Turnover costs you. Disgruntled employees and strikes, some of the ones that we see in the headline news,
Mhm.
that affects you.
Mhm.
And AI in combination with the pandemic has changed the landscape for how we conduct business today. So
Mhm.
how we was doing it pre-pandemic, pre-AI, whatever we was doing before, we can't continue to walk that same path. Some stuff is going to have to give.
Mhm.
But I'm going to circle back to the problem at hand. And the problem that presented Dr. Burks and I was that leaders are inflexible.
Mhm.
Inflexible work schedules is causing people to leave their jobs. But let me tell you this, there are not enough remote, flexible jobs to go. Somebody gonna have to go to work.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, there's a lot of companies that's requiring people to go back to work. It is what it is. Somebody gonna have to go to work. So it's unrealistic to just go from job to job to job to job to job because somebody doesn't want to accommodate your schedule.
Mhm.
Understand the organization, whether or not it's feasible for them. Some organizations just can't accommodate it. It just depends on what they do. And you're just going to have to, if that's the type of work schedule you want, it may not be feasible. So figure out what it is that you want. Some employers just may not be able to accommodate you, and it is what it is, because for every remote job there's 10 people that have applied for that same job, compared to in today's time, compared to the actual in-person job. So just be aware, you want to work from home, it's 9 other people that do too. Dr.
Mhm.
Burks.
Very well said. I don't know, professionals, if there's anything that we left out. We are more than willing to, what we like to call, have a part two if needed. I know we covered a lot of content and I really hope you found value in it. We are not only speaking from a professional standpoint, but a vetted statistical standpoint and also personal experience. And I think that adds a lot of value when we are talking to a high level or dynamic or demographic, I should say, of professionals because we get it. So we challenge you moving forward to just apply or take what we've taught you. Because these aren't just conversations. Our goal is to actually teach you something. And I really hope as we wrap up our board meeting and we, I don't want to say dismiss, but when we close out our meeting, that you see or you can apply what you've learned. So if there's nothing else, Dr. Ellison, feel free to leave us questions and we can always address it later. But we would love for you to stay safe, be encouraged, and stay professional.